I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to talk to all of you. And I wanted to start with a little joke that I have told in various talks that I think really illustrates the caregiver's resourcefulness. So an old man is living in the country, and it's time for him to dig his potato garden, where he grows potatoes and his vegetables to help maintain himself through the winter. Normally, his son, Louis, who is his primary caregiver, helps him to plant the potato garden and do various chores, takes care of him as he's aging and becoming increasingly frail in his life. So, unfortunately, his son has been sent to penitentiary for insider trading and stock fraud. The old man writes a letter to his son in prison. He says, "Dear Louis, I'm feeling really bad because it looks like I won't be able to plant my potato garden this year. The ground is hard, the work is really hard, and I'm just getting, excuse me, too old to do this kind of work, to be digging up a garden plot. I know if you were here, you would dig the garden for me. I wish you were. My problems would be over. Love, Papa." A few days later, he gets a letter from his son. The letter says, "Dear Papa, for heaven's sake, don't dig up that garden. That's where I've buried all the money in the stocks." Well, 4 a.m. the following morning, a team of FBI agents and the local police arrive at the old man's house and dig up the entire garden without finding any money or stocks. They apologize to the old man and leave. Later that day, the old man gets a letter from his son. "Dear Papa, go ahead and plant your potatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Your loving son, Louis." So, a pretty terrific joke, I think, because it really, really illustrates the enormous resourcefulness, the lengths to which Louis went to help his father, even from the state penitentiary. So I like to tell that joke to caregivers because in my 10 years of work with caregivers for the city of Fremont, I have never met a more resourceful, hardworking group of people doing a job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without pay, and without really any kind of a map, to guide them, and often with very little or no respite from their work. So there's a big hole here just behind the podium, so if I disappear suddenly, you'll know where I went. Now, of course, I often wondered when I first heard that joke if Louis went to jail as respite from taking care of his dad. And we don't want to resort to that kind of option, right? So I was asked to address the issue of self-care and stress management, and was mentioned in my intro. Stress management is a big part of my field. I even did a little of my own stress management when I walked in here and saw all these faces and thought, I'm going to get up there and talk to all of you. So stress management is a really important part of my life, and as such, it really informs my work with caregivers who, as far as I know, from my own experience and from the experience of dedicating my work to caregivers for the past 10 years, I see is often sorely lacking. So one of the things I wanted to show you were, starting with my first slide, is that these are some of the conclusions, no surprises here, that I've come to in working with caregivers. And in my brother and I shared the care for my mom in the last years of her life. And since I was in the United States, my mother was in Canada, my brother was in Canada, we went through a period for years of shuttling my mother back and forth because she couldn't stay in the United States for more than 1 month at a time without losing her medical insurance. So it wreaked havoc on our lives, on my life. It ended up in my separation. It ended up in losing one of the jobs that I had, because for years I was just shuttling back and forth and dealing when my mother was with me for a month at a time, taking care of her here, going back and helping to take care of her in Canada. And so that was the one thing that was really extraordinarily helpful for me in all of that time of stress and loss was my own mindfulness practice, and I'll get to that. But so these are some of the core beliefs I think that caregivers have, that there's no time to do things for themselves, that as a caregiver you can put off taking care of yourself, that you're too tired to do anything for yourself, and sometimes that you don't really have any needs. It's the person who you're taking care of who has all the needs. Do people relate to these issues? Yeah. Okay, so moving ahead. Now, I don't have the citation here, but this is from a really important policy brief that was just published in September of 2011 that is from the UCLA Center for Health Policy Research. And the title of this report is called Stressed and Strapped Caregivers in California. Does that say it all? 6 million of you in this state, informal caregivers taking care of family members or loved ones. And California caregivers face higher levels of serious psychological distress and negative health behaviors compared with the general US population. A third of caregivers report that their emotions interfere with their social lives or their daily activities. Middle-aged caregivers, and I can see there are a lot of you in this audience, are more likely to binge drink, smoke, and be overweight. In fact, caregivers who reported serious emotional distress were 208% more likely to smoke cigarettes than non-caregivers with serious emotional distress. Middle-aged caregivers are more likely to exhibit poor health status. 34% of polled caregivers middle-aged report high blood pressure. That's a lot. And older caregivers, we're talking about caregivers who are 75 years or older, are providing more hours of care per week than middle-aged and younger caregivers. 33 hours on the average over a longer period of time, 62 months.